Hi guys, I'm ConjuredJasper, and I have more no sleep stories today, which I'm really excited about because I used to read like no sleep stories like all the time for a while, and I always have like thought they're like super interesting and like crazy. Please like, please comment, and please subscribe and share with anyone you can. It means so much to me, and enjoy the stories. This first story, I am so appreciative to this person for letting me read it, and it comes from user 11 Velociraptors, and they were super awesome, and they let me read their story for free, so woo! I live alone, so who keeps writing messages on my mirror? I turned 18 in 2008, and on the day of my birthday, for reasons I won't bore you with, I packed up my things and moved out. 4 years I lived in my car, working as a barista from 6 to 2, and as a line cook from 4 to 10. My plan was to work until I had enough money for my own place, and then to either go to college or get a real job. Looking back on it now, I don't know how I did it, but by 22 I'd saved up a decent sum of money and began my hunt for a semi-permanent place of residence. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and though housing prices weren't as bad as they are now, it was still a pricey county. After months of asking around, I was connected with Anders, an elderly man who was leasing a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house in North Hollywood for far below the market rate. The catch, because there's always a catch when it comes to affordable housing, was that the house had been terribly maintained. It had been unoccupied for a year and would need some serious TLC before most people could comfortably reside in it. I, however, had been living out of a car for 4 years. As long as the place had running water, it would be an upgrade for me. I moved into the house in fall 2012. Anders gave me a tour before I got settled. He was a short, joyful old man, well-meaning, but how do I put this, maybe not the most focused as a result of his age. At one point during the tour, he showed me the bathroom, then the master bedroom, then the bathroom again, and then the master bedroom again. He was about to walk into the bathroom a third time before I gently guided him down the hall. The house itself was livable but weathered. Dim lighting from outdated fixtures cast long shadows over peeling wallpaper. The ceiling in many of the rooms was discolored from past leaks. The faucet in the kitchen sink was broken. The bathtub was badly chipped, and a few of the cabinet handles fell off in my hand. It was a rundown place located in a bars on the window kind of neighborhood, but still, it was my place. I was smiling ear to ear when Andres gave me the key. "It's a good house with good bones. You take care of it now," he instructed, which I found ironic. Before he left, he paused in the front doorway, drawing a hand to his chin as he looked behind me into the house. I tried to follow his gaze, but couldn't figure out what he was looking at. "Everything all right?" "Yes, just that something looks different about that bathroom, though, and I can't put my finger on what." "Ah, well, it's a good house with good bones. You take care of it now." And with that, he gave me a nod and left me to my unpacking. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed living in a house. I didn't care how run down the place was. Just having an accessible bathroom and a full-size mattress to sleep on made me feel like a king. After I'd spent a few days cleaning the place up, I invited my sister and her fiancé over for dinner. I'm sure it sounds stupid, but my newly acquired ability to host company made me proud. In no time at all, I'd comfortably settled into my new home. That evening, after saying goodbye to my guest, I took a shower. The bathroom lacked a traditional above-the-sink mirror. Instead, it had a wide, full-length mirror mounted on the wall to the left of the vanity. When I exited the shower and stepped up to the glass, raising a hand to wipe away the fog, I noticed something odd in the condensation. Right at my eye level was the word "hi." I didn't know what to make of it. Somehow the letters seemed intentional. It was hard to pass off as simply the way the steam had settled. My sister had been in the bathroom just before she left. Maybe she had written the word on the mirror with her fingertip, and the steam had only made the letters visible after my shower. I almost texted her about it, but the message seemed ridiculous when I typed it out. Paranoid even, I wiped the mirror down and turned in for the night, and soon I forgot about it entirely. The following week I received a promotion at one of my jobs, and while I was grateful for the additional income, my new position meant longer days. Additionally, I realized that a few of the house repairs were beyond my ability, and so I started outsourcing some work to contractors. It was annoying to only have the house to myself at night, but I didn't have another option with my busy schedule. Things were generally progressing smoothly, though. Every once in a while in the middle of the night I would be awoken by a sound that I couldn't quite place. When I next noticed writing on my mirror, I had been living in the house for a month. The second sighting occurred in much the same way as the first. I came back home after work and took a shower. When I pushed back the shower curtain, I looked at the glass and saw, written in the condensation, the words, "Stay, Mom?" Now I could pass 2 letters off as a coincidence, but 2 words, an entire question, that was no coincidence. Someone had been in my bathroom, and recently I had contractors in and out of my house all the time. So one of them could have written the message, but why? I got dressed and put a hand on the bathroom doorknob about to go back into my bedroom when it occurred to me that whoever had written the message might still be around. I slowly cracked open the door, peering down the hallway in one direction then the other. I listened very carefully, but heard nothing. I walked around my house, which didn't take long given its size, and looked for anything out of place. All of my doors were locked, all of my windows were shut, and none of my personal items had been disturbed. If someone had broken into my house, they were long gone by the time I had looked around. That second message put me on edge for days. I triple-checked that my windows and doors were locked each night. I looked in every potential hiding spot, of which there were few in my little house. After I came home from work and before I went to sleep, and yet though I was certain that my house was secure, I couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong. A month passed without incident. I had almost started to feel at home in my new lodgings again until one Friday morning I awoke just past 3 a.m. I couldn't immediately tell what had woken me. Often the house settled at night, creaking and groaning in ways that made it sound alive. But in that moment, the house was silent. It was only after I turned my head to the side did I realize that my bedroom door, which I was certain I had shut, was wide open. I stared down the hallway, feeling as though I was gazing into a black hole. The darkness was abyssal. I kept waiting for my eyes to adjust, waiting for them to pick out the familiar shapes of my home, but they never did. I couldn't see a thing, so why did I feel like something could see me? Like there was something in the house with me, just beyond the threshold to my home, watching, waiting. Somehow I found the courage to rise from my bed and walk toward the door. When I made it to the handle, I grabbed it and slammed the door shut. I didn't investigate further, didn't so much as stick my head into the hall for a closer look. My bedroom door didn't have a lock. None of the doors except the bathroom did, so I dragged my bookcase in front of the door. It was a small bookcase, and an intruder could probably ram the door open anyways if they wanted to, but not before the sound alerted me. When morning came and I had to leave the house for work, I genuinely considered exiting my house through the window. I was almost late by the time I worked up the nerve myself to look around my house before I left. As always, I found nothing amiss. After work, when I reluctantly returned home for the night, I ate a quick dinner and hopped in the shower. I remember standing in the tub for a long time mulling over my predicament. I'd heard horror stories about people secretly living in other people's homes. Maybe I had become a victim without even knowing. But if that was the case, then where were they? There was nowhere to hide in that tiny house. I'd torn the place apart multiple times by then, checking every cabinet and closet. The inside of the house couldn't be accessed from the crawl space, and the air vents were too small for a person to fit in. Suddenly I heard a click, so tiny that I'd almost missed it entirely. I tore back the shower curtain, gripping the shampoo bottle like I was about to bludgeon an intruder to death with it. As I'd come to expect, there was no one in the room, but there was a new message on the mirror. This one was bold, the easiest to read of any of the messages I'd received so far. It was 3 words long. I see you. Some awful feeling of fear, confusion, and anger made my stomach churn. Ultimately, the latter emotion rose above the rest. I hastily dried off and threw on some clothes and grabbed my phone from where I'd left it on the bathroom counter. I punched in Anders' number and glared at that damn mirror as I listened to the phone ring again and again. I'd started to think it was too late for him to be awake when he suddenly picked up. He started to ask me how I was faring in my new lodgings before I cut him off. I need you to tell me if there's some way that a person could be getting into the house, I said. Every night I check every window and door. I check every cupboard, closet, and cabinet, and still things are amiss. You need to let me know if there's some entry point that I'm not aware of. Anders didn't seem to entirely understand what I was asking. What's getting in? You let me know if you're having rat troubles. My last tenant had, before you had rat troubles. Yeah, sure, I've got rats. Besides the doors and windows, how could they be getting in? Or there's the vents, of course, and there was a chimney once, though we had it sealed up a good long while ago. And there's also the crawl space, of course, though I'm sure you've already poked around down there. Though I knew the home had a crawl space, I'd never had much reason to investigate it. I was never able to find the entrance, even after ripping up all the carpeting in the house. Likely, hardwood had been installed over the access door, making it an unlikely point of entry for an intruder. How do I get down to the crawl space? Yes, you should give the crawl space a gander. I barely stopped myself from smashing the phone into the counter. I plan to. Where can I find the entrance? That'll be on the floor of the bathroom closet. I looked around the room. Surely I misheard him. Either that or he was confused again. What? I know it's an odd space for it, but it's only there because that room didn't always used to be a bathroom. The bathroom doesn't have a closet. Sure it does, just left of the vanity. I looked at the mirror, at that long, oversized mirror. I'd always found it odd for a bathroom of that size to have a built-in floor-to-ceiling mirror. What was it that Anders had said when he'd first visited, that something had looked different about the bathroom? Setting my phone down next to the sink, I stepped up close to the glass. I spent a few moments feeling around the frame, looking for a latch, then I grabbed a portion of the right side of the frame in two hands. After one hard yank, the mirror swung open like a door, revealing a large walk-in closet. Anders was saying something on the other end of the line, but I was too stunned to answer. There was a square-shaped hole at the back of the closet, which I assumed led down to the crawl space beneath the house. The closet floor was littered with all kinds of trash, filthy sheets, fast food containers, beer cans, and I realized some of my own items. Little things I thought I'd misplaced, a sock, a toothbrush, a comb, and a small framed photograph of me, my sister, and our old family dog. I crouched down to pick up the photo perched in the doorway as I studied my younger, smiling self. I heard Anders saying my name over the phone, except the voice didn't sound much like Anders at all. It was too deep, too clear, too close. When I looked up, a man was peeking out at me from the hole in the floor. He smiled at me, his eyes wide and his pupils blown, his smile so wide it looked painful, and his hair long and matted. He was only visible from the neck up, and the harsh lighting made it look like a disembodied head was grinning at me from the back of the closet. Horrified, I rose to my feet and ran. I didn't stop running until I made it to my car, which I promptly drove to my sister's house. The next day I drove to the police station to file a report. An officer met me at the house to check the scene, and I showed him the hidden closet, which indeed had an entrance to the crawl space. My best guess was that the intruder was entering my crawl space from the small door on the side of my house. He'd likely been squatting in the house during the year in which it sat unoccupied, and when he saw it was being prepared for sale, he had disguised the closet door so as to keep a little room for himself. Why he decided to stay or why he was leaving me messages, I can't say. From his actions and from what little I saw of him, I think it's safe to assume that he wasn't of sound mind. Unfortunately, the man was never found. For all I know, he's still in that same neighborhood. Hell, he might even be in the same house. I moved to county afterwards and have lived in a studio apartment ever since. The thought of living in a big house with all those rooms and corners and places to hide gives me the creeps. It's not just houses that the incident soured for me, but mirrors as well. These days, when I visit a friend or stay at a hotel, I always have to carefully inspect the bathroom mirrors, shining a light directly into the faces and taping a finger against the glass. Because the worst detail of the whole ordeal was that when revisiting the bathroom with the police officer, I stepped into the old closet, closed the door, and looked into the mirror. Instead of my reflection, I saw the officer's face on the other side of the glass. Am I trying to traumatize you guys with stories about mirrors? Maybe. Okay, I'm gonna show these fuckers off.
Cool crackers.
Oh,
Crackers. Ooh, those are some cool crackers. Whoa, holy moly, look at those crackers. Goodness gracious. Oh fuck, they're like ninja stars, give me one. Oh, that's fucking awesome.
holy.
That really fast and the camera slow down. Bye guys.
This story comes from user FreeMeFromThis. My little sister isn't a missing person anymore because something else came home in her place. I know I should have been ecstatic. My mother's eyes swam with gratitude, and yet mine were always cast to the ground, burning holes into crayon-ridden patches of carpet we refused to clean. We barely dared to dream during those silent dinners without Willow. The jarring sound of clumsy cutlery through our now too empty house. Conversations seeming pointless without her skipping around the dinner table, begging for the attention I gave her. Too little of thumbs ghosting over my phone instead. I wanted to reach back in time and wrench my head from my shoulders when I think of her begging to show me a cartwheel, watching myself roll my eyes instead of grabbing her up and memorizing her face because she would be dead soon. Days of torture turned to weeks, and Willow was gone, lost to some place only our terrible imaginations could conjure up. She was dead, but we were ghosts, haunting our own house with pale apparitions of ourselves, eating to live and speaking only to fill the silence. She was color, and the world redrew itself in black and white for the three of us. Life was over. Until it wasn't. The news she was missing had never really caught on outside the walls of our little town, so when the local policeman came to our doorstep, it was about fanfare. On the first day she vanished, the officer leading the investigation found a small pair of gloves. Her gloves. By the treacherous river that wound through the woods. To them, the investigation was over before it even began. No need to alert the press or sully the town with sad posters. The world chugged along without us, utterly unbothered, and we crumpled into thousands of pieces. But as the rain-soaked policeman uttered on a Tuesday evening, Willow had returned, found in a patch of woods smeared with mud and blood, and asking to come back to our home. She led the police to this house, and as everyone yelled in unison, "She's back!" It's what my parents choked out in desperately relieved sobs. I'd never heard fill our house up before. It's what all the paperwork stated, endless days of making sure everything was above board. It seemed I was the only naysayer, staring into this girl's eyes and knowing with every fiber of my being that this was not my Willow, sitting cross-legged on our family sofa. She looked like her, eerily so. But it was off, it was wrong, her chin a little too pointy, her gaze a little too cold. She was not my bright, bubbly little sister, dressed head to toe in pink. But she said she was. She said it was a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes which sparkled just a shade or two off Willow's. Her voice was a semitone lower, but that's because it's been 2 years and voices changed, my mother insisted. Her chin-length hair now flowed far past her shoulders in that same chocolate hue, a length the Willow would gasp if she saw. This stranger wandered straight into our house, pulled on my sister's too small clothes, and played pretend, pulling the strings on everyone but me. The first night was something out of a horror movie, the heaviest sense of dread settling like lead in my stomach. Bile rose into my throat as she skipped into the living room, settling herself in Willow's seat and tugging impatiently at the hem of my sister's favorite dress. I'd bought it for her on a spontaneous shopping trip, watching her eyes light up at all the little sunflowers lining the collar. She'd been giddy, and now a stranger's fingernails dug into the fabric, leaving marks I'd never get rid of. No longer would that little dress smell like Willow, because it was going to smell like her. "Come to the table," my mother insisted in a too jovial tone, eyes more alight than I'd seen them in years. My father nodded a silent agreement, perhaps a bit more muted than she was, and I had to swallow down my fury, my confusion. I had to. 6 eyes bore into mine, and the chair scraped as I sat down, and this wasn't my sister. She stared over her plate at me with a hollow smile, eyes devoid of any real emotion. Her fingers drummed on the mahogany, a disjointed rhythm I'd never heard despite sitting across from my sister for 9 years. "I missed you." Her words were sickly sweet, head tilted slightly to the side. Her gaze felt almost challenging, but my mother's eyes brimmed with tears as she nodded vigorously, fork hanging in mid-air, not fuck. "Oh gosh, you wouldn't believe," she gulped her words down, overwhelmed. "You've dreamed of a family dinner, haven't you, love?" She regarded me almost desperately, fingers trembling, and I had, of course. I've cried thousands of times for my baby sister, but the girl swinging her legs inches from mine, sitting in my sister's clothes, was not the girl I sobbed for. When her foot brushed mine accidentally, thousands of goosebumps erupted over my skin because it was new, wrong. "I'd love to hear where you've been," I dared whisper into the silence. My mother gasped, fork clattering noisily onto the plate. "Mr. Matthews said—" "Yeah, and if Willow ever turns up, I'll keep quiet about it," I snapped, eyeing this wild animal before me. She sucked in a mighty breath, and I swore I felt her gaze prickle me, but it was only seconds before her eyes became doe-like, wide and comical. "I don't want to talk about it," she uttered sadly, looking to my mother for reassurance. Her lip quivered, hand shook. It was almost laughable how overzealous her performance was, and yet my father admonished me, snapping at me to leave, while my mother gathered up the intruder in her arms, clutching at her so she'd never leave. I watched the family before me, new and being invented before my eyes. As I left, she smirked right at me. Nobody believed me, not on the second day when I walked in and saw her doing perfect cartwheels in the living room, something Willow had been utterly hopeless at. "She must have learned," my mother chirped, scrubbing dishes so vigorously I swore she was leaving cracks. Nobody blinked on the third day when she locked herself in the bathroom and claimed to be too sick to head to the station to kickstart the rigorous medical testing. But it was the fourth night that haunted my dreams, driving me even closer to the edge I'd been dancing along. I largely managed to avoid her, other than the odd lingering gaze as we crossed paths in the hallway, or a wry smile as we brushed shoulders, until there she was at 2 a.m., standing over me as I slept. I didn't scream, didn't startle her into dropping her soulless smile as she gazed upon me, staring straight down mere inches from my face. So close I could feel her hot breath on my nose, feel the animosity coming off her in waves. She didn't move when I clocked her, didn't take a step back or pretend to be doing anything other than pressing her face into mine in the dead of the night. "Why are you here?" I whispered, and we both knew I meant more than standing in my room. She laughed, a little giggle I'd never heard leave Willow's mouth. "I wanted to come home, silly," she hissed back, breath tickling my cheek horribly. I swallowed, desperate not to show the fear which was beginning to course through me. "You aren't Willow," I gritted my teeth, and only then did she pull back a little, mock hurt lining her features. "That's a shame," she frowned. "You're my favorite big sister." My hands trembled under the covers. "And how many sisters have you had?" She paused, and a slow smile spreading across her face. "Oh, lots." I didn't think I've ever felt as unsafe in my life as I did in that moment, watching her eyes glimmer with something truly evil, a sick sort of pride. I didn't find my voice for a long time, but when I did it was small and timid, a shadow of my confidence from only hours earlier. "And what do you want from us?" She thought on it for a moment, tilting her head back and forth as she thought. The question was funny. Even in the dark she looked wrong, as though someone had built her to look like my beloved Willow and misremembered her slightly, getting the angles and details wrong. She lay her fingers on my forehead, painfully drumming the same pattern on my skin as all those days ago. Shamefully, I was too scared to move, even as her fingers jammed into my skull. "I like your mom," she mused, giggling childishly as she caught her mistake. "Our mom? I think she's going to like me more than your sister." But before I could react, she was gone, skipping towards the door in the wrong night clothes, only turning back to casually ruin my life. "She's dead, by the way," she murmured into the silent shrugging. "It was painful, too. Sorry for your loss." And she left, leaving me aghast as I festered into my blanket, desperately grabbing Willow's teddy bear from beside my bed and clutching it to my chest. I sobbed myself to sleep that night, face buried in her favorite toy, knowing for sure that she was never coming home. It only got worse. One day I came home and my father wouldn't speak, only managing to stare at his new daughter as she smirked at him from the shadow of Willow's bedroom. He startled at me in the hallway, scurrying back into his study. When I called for him, he shook his head. "Hang out with your friends, go back outside," he ordered, voice cracking. He slammed the door behind him, and that was that. I was left to stare into Willow's room, locking gazes with a pair of empty eyes sneering at me from under the bed, dark shadows only giving me a glimpse of her little limbs all cracked at the wrong angles as she twisted herself to fit where she shouldn't. When I tried to speak to my mother, she grew more and more irate, once physically covering my mouth with her hand. "Mom, please see that she isn't who she..." But she muffled my words out of existence with a trembling hand, sending me a subtle no with a quick shake of the head. She pleaded towards me with her eyes, and I realized quickly that her steely gaze had fallen behind me. I didn't need to see the parasite in my peripheral, feel her gaze burning holes into the back of my head, and I wasn't imagining it. My mother was fearful, finally turning back to me with a steely resolve. "Everything is fine," she murmured, speaking 1,000 words with only her eyes and her voice dropping to a whisper. "We will make it work." That night, the stranger wearing my sister's favorite bracelet gleefully pushed a piece of paper to the center of the dinner table, eyes lit up with glee. "I drew us," she cried, greedily watching for our reactions. My mother gave nothing away, only visibly swallowing as she drank in the paper, white-knuckled grip on her spoon. My father stood in his seat, striding from the table and slamming the front door behind him as he left us, perhaps for the last time. I, however, dared pick it up, regarding every horrific line and frantic scratching before me. It was us, except the people labeled Mommy and Daddy were standing without heads, rivers of blood dripping down their torn torsos. My double sat in the corner of the table, a pair of gouged-out eyes lying on the floor next to my terrified frame. Our stranger stood smiling with a large rake in her hand, head bent to the side and wearing my sister's dress. But somehow, worst of all, was a picture of the little girl crumpled in the corner, a frown etched upon her face. Willow, the scrawl above her stated, and I could hardly bear it. I don't remember much of it now, just the screaming and crying, lifting whatever wasn't nailed down and hurling it across the room, watching it splinter into 1,000 pieces. My mother cradling me as she dragged me upstairs, letting me fall into a familiar sweet-smelling cardigan, clutching her as though she'd lead me to the swirling wrongness engulfing our house, swallowing us back into the clutches of all grief. But my all-encompassing comfort disappeared because when that horrible little thing downstairs called a desperate "Mommy," my mother went rigid. "You don't have to go," I pleaded through bleary eyes, but her sad smile told me that she did. "I prayed 2 years ago for my baby girl to come home," she said in a thick voice, clutching my hands as if begging me to understand. I'll always wish I tried harder to keep her in that room with me, because the moment I loosened my grasp, I sealed her fate. The thing downstairs called, and she offered me a sad smile, finger brushing mine, and before she disappeared through the darkness of the door, I never saw her again. Before my eyes closed and sleep claimed me, I saw the head of Willow's beloved bear discarded on the floor across the room, 3 feet from its body. My heart sank into my stomach, and I drifted off into nightmares, feeling somehow it was all over. When I awoke, slick from sweat, she was there in the darkest corner of my room, almost Willow. Nighttime shrouded her, but I could see the blood even in the dim light. Something glinted in her hand under the glow of the moonlight, and her eyes blazed with something bigger than the both of us. 12 minutes passed, and she didn't move. Her relentless empty stare locked onto me as she swayed back and forth. I knew that the second I moved she was going to lunge. Somehow I knew that's what Mom did. That's why the room fell into such an uneasy silence, because I was utterly alone, and when I held my breath I swore I could hear the shift of fabric. Yes, she was definitely closer to me than she had been 5 seconds ago. If I squinted, I could see her feet shuffling towards me in time with my erratic breathing. I ran, of course, limbs jelly as I sprinted past my parents' room, frantically choking as the stench of blood. She locked all the doors, sealed all the windows. I don't even remember how I made it to the hospital, sodden and picking glass out of my skin as a kind nurse led me to a room, concern etched into her features as she promised to return for me as soon as she called the police. It's hard to type with blood trickling down my phone, fragments of the upstairs window jammed in my flesh. It's over, I'm sure, but somehow with every second that passes I feel closer to my sister, the real one, not the one with her face pressed against the 3rd-story window of my hospital room, face contorted in bloody evil glee. Yikes. That's that for stories, and thank you so much for listening to all those, and please comment, and if you have any paranormal experiences, I do have a subreddit for stories, and yeah, just please like, please comment, and please subscribe and share, and stay spooky, guys. Thank you so much.